light was so proudly revealed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight on the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rocked like the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say us that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the lands of the free and the home of the brave.
Calm left. March. March time. March.
Introduce the speaker today. I think you'll enjoy him. Our speaker today, he's a decorated Vietnam veteran. Flew Huey helicopters as a Dustoff pilot. The Dustoff motto was, "So others may live." He flew nearly 1,000 combat hours, shot down twice while trying to evacuate injured American soldiers. He retired from the Army after 20 years as the CW4. His career continued with the Financial Services Corporation for 25 years. Guy's an overachiever, isn't he? Serving our military families with their financial programs. For almost 5 years now, he and his wife have been very involved with a nonprofit called Project Sanctuary, and they help veteran families. They have donated financially and their time, accumulating more than 2,700 volunteer hours so far. But who's counting? They were recognized as Project Sanctuary's 2020 Volunteers of the Year. In fact, he and his wife will be volunteering at their 34th six-day retreat beginning next week. Before Doug comes up, let's watch a short video.
Yesterday was Veterans Day, and you probably all heard the definition of a veteran as someone who has at some point in their life written a check payable to the United States of America in the amount of up to and including his or her life. Let me take you on an actual mission with me. It may have been a Tuesday, or perhaps Sunday. It's hard to remember since there are no weekends in war. What I do remember was another hot, muggy day, late 1970 in Vietnam. My call sign in Vietnam was Dustoff 3-4, and we were first up, meaning we would be launched for the next medical evacuation mission in our area of operation, usually multiple times a day and night. The mission horn sounded, we were off. The whole crew is now sprinting to the helicopter. Within 2 minutes, we were airborne. The mission came across the radio. 1, U.S., critical, hoist required. Coordinates Yankee Tango 320-120. Contact Tango 22 on 47.30. Those words on the radio meant there was an injured American soldier needing to be extracted out of the jungle of Vietnam and taken to a medical facility for treatment. The call sign for the unit in the jungle was Tango 22. The pickup zone was about 40 miles east of our location. We needed to clear a route through the artillery fire bases. Making those radio calls, the flight path was good. When we were in the general vicinity at a safe altitude from small arms fire, we radioed Tango 22 asking about the situation, the status of the patient, and enemy contact. Tango 22, this is Dustoff 3-4. Pop smoke.
Just doing fine, Jack.
This man was to mark his position with a smoke grenade.
Take me home.
Choo choo cherry. I radioed back to Tango 22 as the red smoke filtrated up through the jungle canopy. We used Kool-Aid flavors to identify the smoke's color. Crew briefing done. Approach path selected. The crew ready. We made a rapid descent from our current altitude down to the top of the jungle canopy. Things began to progress rapidly from this point. On one radio, we were talking to gunships in the area. On the second radio, we were talking to Tango 22. And as we approached the treetop of the jungle, the crew went hot mic, so we didn't have to press the little talk button to communicate with each other. Since we couldn't land to pick up the injured American, we would be using our hoist to lower a cable and jungle penetrator down to the ground to bring the wounded soldier up to the helicopter. Hovering around the top of the jungle, looking for the remaining smoke filtering through the jungle canopy, we were talking to Tango 22 and he was giving us directions to his location, and then the unmistakable sound of an AK-47 rang out. The crew shouted, "We're taking fire. We're taking hits." And Tango 22 shouted, "Get out of here, Dustoff 3-4. The mission changed in an instant. The warning lights in our cockpit began to come on, and the pressure gauges began to fall below acceptable limits. We needed to find a place to land before we crashed into the jungle. The arteries of our Huey were severed, leaking engine oil, transmission and hydraulic fluid and fuel. The mission now was to get my crew to safety. A couple of 1,000 meters away was a clearing and we headed for it. The engine could quit at any moment, so each minute counted. We had no idea if it was occupied by the Viet Cong or not. It was our only choice. Mayday, 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 Dustoff 3-4 going down west of Yankee Tango 320-120. Mayday, 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 Dustoff 3-4 going down. It was transmitted over the emergency frequency. What seemed like an eternity after making our emergency landing in that clearing, other helicopters were now circling overhead, and other American troops surrounded us until we could safely be extracted out about an hour later. Thousands of these missions were conducted just like this one, day after day, night after night. In good weather or bad, by 21 and 22-year-old young men just like you and me. It just didn't stop these crews from doing their mission. The great words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy are so true today. A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors, the men it remembers. These are the heroes of the Vietnam War, and their names are carved on a black granite wall in Washington, D.C. There are over 58,300 heroes on that wall whose check was cashed with their life. In honor of Veterans Day and every other day, I salute my fellow veterans for your service to our great country.
Okay, sharing his experiences, please join me in welcoming all the way from Benbrook, Texas, Vietnam veteran, TEDx speaker, and drone pilot extraordinaire, Doug Peterson.
Wonderful story, huh? I'll get back to that in a few minutes. But you know, all of that started about 37 miles west of here, in a place called Mineral Wells, Texas, at Fort Walters helicopter place. This is where the Army Aviator was sent to begin their flight training in that little tiny, little TH-55, where if you were a tall guy, they put you in an OH-23. But I was in the little TH-55, and we had hundreds of those little things flying around all over Palo Pinto County. And it just making all sorts of noise, landing in ranchers' fields, and back then we would have a little white tire, a tire painted white, yellow, or red, and that was a little landing zone that we would go ahead and practice our landings in as we were going through this training. So there I am, little 21-year-old, going through flight school. That's my class picture. In that picture, are two classmates who were on the wall. So then, after Fort Walters, I left Fort Walters in December 1969 and went on to Fort Rucker, Alabama. So here we are in Fort Rucker. We get trained. I get to fly some B model Hueys and D model Hueys. And in this picture, right there, I was flying in the last 4 weeks of flight school. I was in the advanced training phase of my helicopter training, and I was flying B model gunships. So I was flying helicopters that had 2.75 rockets, or configuration of twin miniguns, or 40mm grenade launcher up in the nose. So it was a lot of different ways, a lot of different armament that we got to fly. And so I was selected to fly this gunship, and so I was kind of pretty proud of that. That was a lot of fun. To blow things up in the fields and, you know, shoot at tanks and trucks. So after May 1970, when I graduated, I went to Southeast Asia, and I reported to the 21st Replacement Battalion, which is, we landed in Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, and we were bused over to Long Binh. Long Binh is where the 21st Replacement Battalion was, where you got your assignment in Vietnam. And so I got to Vietnam and was over at the 21st waiting for my flight assignment, and they said, "You're going to Dustoff." And I said, "Oh, no. You don't understand, I'm a gun pilot. I know how to shoot guns and things." He goes, no. We're going to Dustoff. And I am so happy that was my assignment. Because the mission of the Dustoff was really one that I took a lot of pride in. So others may live, that was our motto. Matter of fact, helicopters were called Dustoff. That would happen, that call sign came into play early, mid to 1960s, 65 or so, when the Vietnam helicopters, then from that point on, were called Dustoff. And in fact, medical evacuation helicopters today are still called Dustoff in their missions. So Dustoff has stayed around. So this is I apologize for the photos. I was using one of those Instamatic disposable cameras, those things that had, these had negative megapixels, This didn't have a megapixel. It didn't even come shots that are kind of bad. But this was the 45th Med Company Air Ambulance. It was a full company of helicopters. We had 4 flight platoons that we were assigned. So our area of operation, our home base was there in Long Binh, which was northeast of Saigon. We had a number of different remote sites where we would send crews out, and they would stay there 3 days at a time to work that area of operation during so we would go down here to Tan An, or up here to Tay Ninh, Nui Dat, and Swan Lock. Nui Dat was an Australian base, or Australian outpost, and so when we stayed out there, the Australians, they were pretty good. I mean, we had white tablecloths for dinner. We had a choice of entrees. We had 2 choices, and I mean, it was pretty sweet when we had a Nui Dat standby. And of course, we were in support of the Australians at that time. We supported all NATO forces, the U.S., Korea, the Australians, the ARVNs, the Republic of Vietnam troops, and civilians. So our area of operation was quite broad. So there we are, and so and when I give this presentation to high school or schools, high schools or middle schools, I mentioned this thing that's up there, and I asked them if they know what that is, and they obviously don't know what that is, and I say it's an air conditioner, and I said, but we didn't have a Lowe's or a Home Depot to go down and buy one of those things. You had to trade, and those that have been there know that whatever you got, you had to trade for. And money really wasn't part of that. It was if you had a good pair of boots, that may be enough to get you something. But it was all in trade from one thing to the other. So just another picture of our flight line. I will show this picture. This is in the background, that's our 45th, and this is the 93rd Evac Hospital, which we brought quite a few patients into that. And there, also in Long Binh was another 24th Surgical Hospital that was just on the other side of Long Binh, so we would bring patients to both of those hospitals depending on their injury. Would dictate which hospital we would go to, but that's a pretty good picture of their hospital and our flight line up here. So I mentioned one of the standbys was called Tay Ninh, which is, Tan An, which was southwest of Saigon. It was down in the Delta area, and this was a Navy base. The river is right up in here, and so we had a lot of riverboats, Navy guys. So the Navy was in this area as well. Here is our helicopter, and we were staying in these little. I can't remember if they were. I think they were small GT medium tents, is where we were staying. And this little runway, you can see that there's an airplane. You can barely see. There's an airplane on this runway. Air America would fly in here a lot. And Air America was another, they had helicopters and airplanes and CIA kind of stuff. So they would be in and out of there. So that was Tan An. So here's flying out of Tan An. The guy on the left is a guy named Bill Yancey. He and I used to fly together quite a bit. And on the windscreen, we didn't call it a windshield in the helicopter, it's a windscreen. Up here is where we wrote our missions in grease pencil. So as missions would come in, we would take our grease pencil, we would write the grid coordinates, the call sign, and the frequency, and what kind of injuries that they had, and we would then write, and we would be writing 3 and 4 of those at a time. I recall that during one time down in Tan Am, we had to have 2 crews come in because the operations in that area was pretty intense, and we were having an awful lot of pickups. We were flying 12-hour days, I mean continuously flying 12 hours. We had hot refuel in Tan Am and then go back out and pick up more people. And the windscreen would just get filled up with the grease pencil. As we completed one mission, we would, wipe that one off and fill it up with somebody else. And then after about 12 hours or so, we would land, and the other helicopter would then go back out and pick up on the missions. And we did that for like 4 or 5 days. I got almost 50 hours of flight time in 4 days standing out there. And that's a lot of sitting on your butt on an armored seat flying around. The other thing that some of you may or not know is that the Dustoff crews were not armed. We had I had a 38, and the crew and the co-pilot usually had a 38 or maybe a 45. The crew chief and the medic were armed with an M16, and those were for patient protection. And that's the only reason we had armament. Now, the first cab had its own version of medevac. Their call sign was medevac and not Dustoff. The medevacs had M60 machine guns on their helicopters because they were dual mission. Not only did they fly the medical evacuation side of it, but they would also do troop transport, so they were armed. But Dustoff, if you ever hear call sign Dustoff, they were not armed except for personal weapons for the use for patient protection only. The Geneva Convention dictate. Of course, we had that big white and red cross on the door, on the nose, and on the belly, which were really, really good aiming points. So it's just great target practice. So here is this is Lefty Lemon smoke, as we talked about in the video, where we use Kool-Aid colors. And so we would call for the ground troop to pop smoke. We would tell them not to tell us we would not tell them what color smoke to pop, because if we said pop red smoke, then we would see a red smoke here, one over there, one over here, and we never really knew which one was the true one. So we would just say pop smoke, we would identify it, and they would confirm. So here we are, there's the yellow smoke right here, and then this is just another closer up picture, and we would land on this little dike in this rice paddy, and we would sit there for typically 2 to 3 minutes is an average time on the ground. And we would then, just like in the video that I did, we would be at 1,500 feet, we would rapidly descend in some crazy maneuver that I can't really explain how it works. But we got down from 1,500 down to the ground in seconds. So we want to minimize the time that we were in that small arms fire window. So to get that down on the ground, we would then low level to the pickup zone, and then we would low level out of there in a different direction, and then we would do what we call a cyclic climb, and just go rocket up to 1,500 feet, and then head to the medical facility. So we're on the ground for 2 to 3 minutes on average. This is just me picking up dropping off some patients at Mito. Mito was an ARVN medical facility that was where we would take our ARVN injured. This This is a pickup zone near a place called Bentry. So a lot of the areas that we flew into were just really not very accessible for a helicopter. So we would have to sit there and just kind of hover down, and our crew in the back, we had the crew chief on one side, the medic on the other side, and we would just kind of stair-step our way down into the canopy as best as we could to pick up the injured. So you can see in this case it's a little tight. The rotor blades don't make good weed whackers, though I have whacked a few trees and damaged a few rotor blades as a result. Sometimes we would land on boats. Those were kind of interesting. Again, another picture of trying to land in a very confined space. Sometimes even after we got down, we couldn't actually physically land. We had to lift the patients up into the helicopter from that point. Again, we try to minimize our time on the ground. However, during hoist missions like the one that was described in the TEDx talk, you're a sitting duck for a period of 10 to 30 minutes because you lower the cable down, and sometimes the people on the ground are not familiar with the jungle penetrator and don't understand how it works. And so they're messing around with it, and you're sitting there hovering, and you're just, like I said, a sitting duck up there. If you start taking enemy fire, you have a few choices. And then you bring the guy up, hopefully. Now, I've had them, some of the ARVN ones that I did, the Vietnamese were relatively small people, lightweight, maybe 100 pounds or so, and they would put 3 of them on that jungle penetrator. It's not designed for 3 people. There are 3 little folding things there and 3 straps, but that's not designed to be for 3 people. The reason sometimes they just didn't understand, and we try to do it anyway. But you'll see another picture in a moment. With that hoist boom so far out to be lowered down, our center of gravity was shifted to the far right. And so sometimes as we would lift them off the ground, we would have to put left cyclic in to hold it steady. And sometimes we had the stops, the mechanical stop of that cyclic, and we'd have to somehow lighten that load because it was too heavy. Some of the other hoist missions I've done is, priority 1 was a U.S. A U.S. soldier was priority 1. Priority 2 was NATO, any of the Koreans or Australians or whoever. 3 was the ARVNs, and then 4 were civilians. So there was a 1A priority, and that was a scout dog. And I had to hoist a scout dog out because it had been shot. And so the handler was on the hoist with the dog as we lifted them up. So that was kind of an interesting one. I've done a couple of night hoist missions, which is a whole other presentation. That's way too scary. I've had, while the patient was up on the hoist, the enemy was shooting them. And we can only get them on us so fast, and we got them on and got them to a medical facility. But that's just one of the sad parts of war. So you can see here now, this hoist, how far it is outside of the helicopter that was out there. This was real close to where I was shot down in that video. So here is, this is the tactical map I used in Vietnam. And it's plastic. I laminated it after I put it together. And there are still some grease pencil marks on it from where that I've used in marking some of the missions. So if you want to look at that afterwards, I've got it available. So those that are familiar with TED and TEDx talks, they tell you how much time you have to do your presentation. They said, you have 6 minutes. I think I did pretty good in 6 minutes. That was a real challenge to get that mission down so you could come with me and ride with me in that mission. But what I get to do now is I get to tell you, as Paul Harder was at page 2. Page 2 of that is that after we were picked up and taken back to the home base, while we're still in that place where we landed, we were looking around counting bullet holes, and I think we had counted 25 holes in the helicopter. And one of the rounds in the instrument panel, one of the rounds had come through the instrument panel and stopped and broke the glass over on the co-pilot side. So the round was still in the glass. Had it had any more velocity, he would have taken it in his head. He would have had a headshot. And there's obviously no armament there. So when we got back to the home base, I said, well, we got to get another helicopter. We got to finish the mission. And he goes, he elected not to go back with me. I got another helicopter, got another crew, and we went back out and we completed the mission, got the guy out of the jungle, and got him to a medical facility for treatment. So we were able to finish the mission, even though it was a little late.
Did he save that instrument?
I don't know whether he did or not. I would have taken it out myself.
Yes, sir.
So no compromise, no rationalization, no hesitation, just fly the mission, and that's what we did. And that was our motto. So approximately 900,000 patients were evacuated during the Vietnam War. Nearly 500,000 Dustoff missions were conducted. On an average 2-pilot crew, the crew would average around almost 1,300 patients during their 2 years. And that's a lot of people. During the golden hour is from the time they were wounded to the time they got to a medical facility, they had a 90% survival rate. And all 98% of the urgent missions that we received fell within that hour. So that was pretty good. And then hoist missions were the 7 times as dangerous. I ended up doing 25 hoist missions while I was in country. That's a lot of hovering out there in the jungle. So that this is a picture of a memorial park that's in Dover, Delaware, and I just got back last month from the Vietnam Dustoff Association reunion. We have a reunion, and this park where we were here, and many of us purchased bricks that were commemorated during our visit while we were there. So we have this one little walk that's here has those bricks laid out. So after Vietnam, yes, sir.
I would ask you a question, make a comment in just a moment.
So after my tour in Vietnam, I went back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was flying Dustoff out of Fort Bragg for 3 years. I moved on into a CAV unit. I went on to Germany, flew a CAV unit, and then a Combat Aviation Battalion company, flew OH-58s and Hueys. I came back, I was teaching flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when I was back in Fort Walters over here, my flight instructor was a civilian, Department of the Army civilian. And his name was Sergeant, his last name was Sergeant. And his nickname was Pink Slip Sergeant. And the reason that his name was Pink Slip is that each day you went out to fly, you were evaluated on your flight. And if you were given a white slip, it means you were satisfactory. That if you got a pink slip, it was an unsatisfactory day in the helicopter. So his name was Pink Slip Sergeant. And he actually had, on the back of his helmet, he had a white helmet, on the back of his helmet was a female in a pink slip. So during my tour in Fort Rucker, Alabama, teaching initial entry flight school, my nickname was Pink Slip Peterson. So then after I finished teaching flight school and some refresher training and so forth, I received a Black Hawk transition, flew and taught Black Hawk for a number of years, took a Black Hawk company to Germany for 3 years and stayed in Germany. Somehow or another, in the infinite wisdom of the United States Army, they gave me a fixed-wing transition at my 17 years in the Army. And so I was flying U-21s and C-12s for the commanding general at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And then I retired in 1989. So that was my synopsis of my military career.
I enjoyed your talk. I just wanted to make a comment to you. My best friend, college roommate, fraternity brother during the war, flew with the 45th at a Long Bend. He flew Dustoff 13. And in February 5th, 1969, they were on a night hoist, and they were hit by an RPG, and their aircraft exploded. They all were killed. But you're the first person I run into who flew with the 45th. I'd like to visit with you.
Very well. Thank you.
There's another young man back here who I think may have trained with you back here in a burgundy shirt. So you got a couple people that want to visit with you.
All right. Well, I'm here for. I'm not going anywhere. But, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about what happened. I like sharing the stories. I share this story to schools, high schools, and middle schools, and bring a few more memorabilia. I don't bring the map, but I'll bring some other things. And I even still fit in the flight suit. This is the one you saw. That still fits. A little tight, but it still fits. So again, I want to thank you. I appreciate you indulging me in sharing my little story.
Back anytime, thank you, Lord.
Wow, what a great talk. We enjoy these talks every month. Everybody's got a story, like we said. Some combat, some not, but everybody's got a story. Just as a token, a small token from roll call, Buster made this up. Thank you, Buster. Just a coffee mug with roll call on the front, a little saying on the back. I think you may be able to relate. It says, I served, I sacrificed, I regret nothing. I'm not a hero, but I'm proud to be a U.S. veteran. Thank you.